The alarm bells rang through Nexus Prime trading station like thunder in the void. Commander Zextar dropped his morning report and rushed to the communications center. His forearms moved quickly across the control panels, while his crystalline skin flickered with nervous energy. Something big was happening, and he could feel it in his bones. The message came in on emergency frequency 7. Static filled the speakers before a human voice broke through the noise. The words were clear, but carried the weight of desperation that made every alien worker on the station stop what they were doing. "This is Captain Rachel Stone of the colony ship Terra Nova. We are under attack by Krillian raiders. 50,000 civilians on board, including women and children. Our shields are failing, and weapon systems are down to 30%. We need help now, or we're all going to die." Zextar felt his blood turn cold. He had heard stories about the Krillians. They were pirates who showed no mercy to anyone. They took what they wanted and killed everyone else. But this message was coming from humans, and that made everything different. Lieutenant Commander Jake Murphy was drinking coffee in the station's small human quarter when his communicator started beeping. Murphy was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from 20 years of military service. He had been assigned to Nexus Prime as Earth's representative to help with trade relations. Most days his job was boring, but today was not going to be one of those days. "Murphy here," he said into the device. "Sir, you need to get to communications right now," came the reply. "We have a human distress call, and it's bad." Murphy ran through the corridors of the station. Other species moved out of his way as he passed. Most aliens were still getting used to humans and their reputation. Stories had spread through the galaxy about Earth and the creatures that lived there. Some said humans came from a death world where everything tried to kill them. Others whispered that humans were so tough they could survive in space without suits for short periods. When Murphy reached the communications center, he found Zextar staring at a screen filled with data. The alien commander looked up at him with large eyes that showed real fear. "Your people are in trouble," Zextar said simply. Murphy read the message and felt anger building in his chest. The Terra Nova was one of the newest colony ships in the human fleet. It carried families who were traveling to establish a new settlement on the edge of known space. These were not soldiers or warriors. They were farmers and teachers and doctors who just wanted to build a new life among the stars. "How far away are they?" Murphy asked. 6 hours at maximum speed," Zextar replied. "But the nearest Federation fleet is 2 days out. By then it will be too late." Murphy nodded and activated his emergency transmitter. The device sent a priority signal directly to Fleet Admiral Lisa Chang aboard the flagship U.S. Liberty. Chang was known throughout human space as the Iron Lady. She had never lost a battle and never abandoned her people. The signal traveled through hyperspace at the speed of light. 3 systems away, Admiral Chang was reviewing supply reports when her aide Lieutenant Sarah Williams burst into her office. "Admiral, we have an emergency transmission from Nexus Prime," Williams said breathlessly. Chang looked up from her desk. She was a small woman with short black hair and eyes that could cut through steel. At 50 years old, she had spent more time in space than most people spent on solid ground. Her uniform was perfect, and her medals told the story of a career built on protecting human interests. "Put it through," Chang ordered. Murphy's voice filled the Admiral's office. "Admiral, this is Lieutenant Commander Murphy at Nexus Prime. We have received a distress call from the colony ship Terra Nova. They are under attack by Krillian raiders with 50,000 civilians on board. Their defenses are failing, and they need immediate assistance." Chang stood up from her chair. Her face showed no emotion, but her hands clenched into fists. She had been expecting something like this for months. The galaxy was full of predators who tested new species to see what they were made of. Pirates always went after what looked like easy targets, and civilian ships fit that description perfectly. "Where is Terra Nova's exact position?" Chang asked. "Kepler 442 system near the outer rim," Murphy replied. "Admiral, the nearest Federation. Forces are at least 48 hours away. If we don't act now, those people are going to die." Chang walked to the large window that showed the stars beyond her ship. The U.S. Liberty was surrounded by dozens of other human warships. Cruisers and destroyers floated in perfect formation, while supply ships moved between them like worker ants. This was the Third Fleet, and it represented the most powerful military force humanity had ever assembled. "Murphy, I want you to send me everything you have on the Terra Nova and the attack," Chang said. "Williams, get me fleet communications immediately." Within minutes, Chang was connected to every ship captain in the Third Fleet. Their faces appeared on screens around her office. These were men and women who had followed her through the border wars and the pirate campaigns. They trusted her judgment, and she trusted their courage. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation," Chang began. "The colony ship Terra Nova is under attack by Krillian raiders. 50,000 civilians are in immediate danger, and we are the only force close enough to help them." Captain Rick Stone of the destroyer U.S. Ranger spoke first. Stone was a former merchant marine whose family had been killed by pirates 5 years earlier. His weathered face showed the same anger that Chang felt in her heart. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Stone asked. "We are going to save those people," Chang replied simply. "I don't care how many Krillian ships are waiting for us. I don't care what the odds are. No human civilian dies on my watch." The other captains nodded in agreement. Captain Amy Walsh of the cruiser U.S. Phoenix smiled grimly. Walsh was known for her aggressive tactics and her hatred of pirates. Captain Tony Mitchell of the battleship U.S. Thunderbolt cracked his knuckles. Mitchell had been an asteroid miner before joining the military, and he knew how to handle dangerous situations. "Fleet-wide emergency deployment," Chang ordered. "All ships prepare for immediate hyperspace jump to Kepler 442. Battle stations and full combat load. We're going in hard and fast." Across the Third Fleet, alarm bells began to ring. Thousands of human sailors ran to their posts. Weapon systems came online, and shield generators hummed with power. The massive engines of the warships began to glow. As they prepared for the jump to hyperspace on distant worlds throughout the galaxy, long-range sensors began to detect something unusual. Energy signatures were spiking in human space as dozens of warships prepared to move at once. Alien observers watched their screens with growing concern as the readings climbed higher and higher. "Admiral," Chang stood on the bridge of the Liberty as her crew prepared for battle. Commander Steve Collins, her tactical officer, was running final. Systems checks. Collins was a former chess champion who could see 5 moves ahead in any situation. He looked up from his console with a determined expression. "All ships report ready for jump, Admiral," Collins said. Chang nodded and activated the fleet communications. Her voice reached every human sailor in the Third Fleet. "This is Admiral Chang. Today we go to the aid of our people. The Terra Nova carries 50,000 civilians, including children, who are depending on us to save them. We will not let them down. We will show the galaxy what happens when someone threatens human lives. All ships jump on my mark." The stars outside began to stretch as the hyperspace engines engaged. One by one, the ships of the Third Fleet disappeared into the cosmic void. They were heading toward a battle that would change everything. Back on Nexus, Prime Commander Zextar watched the sensor readings with amazement. He had never seen so many warships move at once. The energy signatures were off the charts, and the speed of deployment was incredible. Most species took days to organize such a response, but the humans had done it in less than an hour. How many ships did they send? Zexstar asked Murphy. Murphy checked the readings and smiled grimly. All of them, he replied. The message began to spread through the galactic communication networks. The human fleet was moving, and it was moving fast. Species that had never heard of Earth suddenly found themselves watching sensor readings that defied explanation. The Deathworlders were coming, and nothing would ever be the same again. The news traveled faster than light itself through the galactic communication networks. On the core world of Zentara, Prime High Chancellor Vorthek was enjoying his morning meal when his aide burst into the dining chamber. The ancient reptilian leader had ruled for over 300 years and had seen many crises, but the look on his aide's face told him this was different. Chancellor, we have an emergency, the aide said with trembling voice. The humans have mobilized their entire third fleet. Vorthak set down his eating utensil and fixed his aide with a stare that had intimidated countless diplomats. His scaled skin rippled with concern as he processed the information. The humans were still new to the galactic community, and most species were still trying to understand them. How many ships? Vorthak asked. Over 200 warships, sir, the aide replied. They're all heading toward the Kepler 442 system at maximum speed. The Chancellor felt his blood run cold. 200 warships was more than most species possessed in their entire military. For the humans to deploy such a force meant something serious was happening. He had read the reports about Earth and the creatures that lived there, but he had assumed they were exaggerated. Convene an emergency session of the Galactic Council immediately, Vorthak ordered, and get me everything we have on human military capabilities. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Species that had lived in peace for centuries suddenly found themselves staring at sensor readings that made no sense. The energy signatures coming from human space were unlike anything they had ever recorded. On the water world of Aquatica, Prime Admiral Glubrex of the Cetacean Defense Force watched his tactical displays with growing alarm. His species had evolved in the deep oceans and were naturally cautious about surface dwellers. The humans came from a land world that most aquatic species considered hostile and dangerous. Sir, the human fleet is generating power readings that exceed our theoretical maximums, his aide reported. Glubrex had fought in the last Galactic War, and he recognized the signs of a major military operation. But this was different. The humans were moving with a speed and coordination that suggested they had been planning for such an event. Their ships were accelerating at rates that would crush most organic beings. Send a message to the Galactic Council, Glubrex ordered. Tell them the Cetacean Defense Force is monitoring the situation with great concern. Meanwhile, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Federation, found herself fielding communications from panicked alien governments. Rodriguez was an elegant woman with silver hair who had spent 20 years in diplomatic service. She was known for her calm demeanor and ability to diffuse tense situations, but today was testing her skills to the limit. The first call came from the Avian Confederation. Chancellor Kawthik's feathers were ruffled with anxiety as his image appeared on Rodriguez's screen. The bird-like species had always been nervous around predators, and humans definitely fell into that category. Ambassador Rodriguez, what is the meaning of this massive military deployment? Kawthik demanded. Our sensors show your fleet moving at combat speed toward the outer rim. Rodriguez took a deep breath before responding. She had been briefed on the Terra Nova situation, but she also understood how the fleet deployment looked to outside observers. 200 human warships moving at once would terrify any species that didn't know the full story. Chancellor, the Third Fleet is responding to a distress call from one of our colony ships, Rodriguez explained calmly. 50,000 civilians are under attack by Krillian raiders, and we are moving to assist them. Kawthik's feathers settled slightly, but his eyes remained suspicious. 50,000 lives do not justify risking galactic stability. Your fleet deployment could trigger a war. Before Rodriguez could respond, another communication came in from the Silicon Collective. The crystal beings communicated through harmonic frequencies that translated as pure mathematics. Their message was simple but alarming. Human military. Force exceeds calculated parameters. Recommend immediate diplomatic intervention to prevent galactic conflict. Rodriguez spent the next 3 hours taking similar calls from species across the galaxy. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Alien leaders expressed concern about human military capabilities and questioned whether the response was proportional to the threat. Some species suggested that losing 50,000 civilians was an acceptable cost to avoid destabilizing the galaxy. That last point made Rodriguez angry in a way that surprised her. She had always prided herself on her diplomatic neutrality, but the suggestion that human lives were expendable struck her as fundamentally wrong. She began to understand why Admiral Chung had deployed the entire fleet without hesitation. On the mining world of Faroes Major, the Industrial Guild received reports from their deep space monitoring stations. Guild Master Vertan was a practical being who dealt in facts and figures. The energy readings from human space defied every calculation his engineers could produce. "Sir, the human ships are accelerating beyond safe parameters," his chief engineer reported. "Their crews should be crushed by the gravitational forces." Vertan studied the data with growing unease. His species had been building starships for thousands of years, and they understood the physical limitations of space travel. Yet the humans seemed to ignore those limitations completely. What kind of beings can survive such acceleration? Vertan wondered aloud. The answer came from a xenobiology specialist who had been studying human physiology reports. "Sir, humans evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme weather conditions. Their bodies are designed to withstand punishment that would kill most species." As news of the human fleet movement spread, the Krillian hegemony began to realize they had made a terrible mistake. War Chief Grakthos commanded the raiding fleet that was attacking Terra Nova. He had expected easy prey and quick profit from capturing human civilians. The intelligence reports had suggested that humans were weak newcomers with limited military capabilities. Those reports were proving to be catastrophically wrong. Grakthos stood on the bridge of his flagship watching his raiders struggle to break through Terra Nova's defenses. The human colony ship was proving much tougher than expected. Its shields were holding despite hours of bombardment, and its emergency weapons were taking a toll on his smaller ships. War Chief were receiving multiple hyperspace signatures, his sensor operator reported. Large vessels approaching fast. Grakthos felt his confidence begin to crack. He had brought 80 ships to this raid, which should have been more than enough to handle one civilian vessel. But the approaching signatures suggested something much larger was coming. How many ships? He demanded. The sensor operator's voice trembled as he replied. "Over 200, sir. They're all military vessels, and they're coming in hot." Far away on the ethereal plane, the Council of Ancient Minds began to take notice of events in physical space. These beings have evolved beyond material form millions of years ago and rarely concern themselves with the affairs of younger species. But something about the human response triggered their ancient memories. Thought speaker Lamainth had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. She had seen species achieve greatness and watched them destroy themselves through war and conquest. But the human deployment pattern reminded her of something she had not seen for eons. The new species shows characteristics of the old guardians. She communicated to her fellow ancients. They risk everything to protect their own. The old guardians had been a legendary species that vanished from the galaxy millions of years before current civilizations arose. Ancient records suggested they had been protectors who fought against forces of destruction and chaos. Most species considered them myths, but the thought speakers remembered when they were real. Back on Zintara Prime, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in record time. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the great chamber, while holographic displays showed the movement of human forces. High Chancellor Vorthik called for order as panic spread through the assembly. "Fellow beings, we face an unprecedented situation," Vorthik announced. "The human species has deployed a military force larger than most of our combined fleets. We must determine their intentions before this situation escalates beyond our control." Ambassador Rodriguez appeared via hologram from Earth's embassy. Her calm presence helped settle some of the panic in the chamber. She had prepared for this moment, and she knew that her words could determine how the galaxy viewed humanity for generations to come. "Honored representatives, I understand your concerns," Rodriguez began, "but I ask you to consider the facts. 50,000 innocent people are under attack by pirates. My species cannot and will not abandon them to their fate. The Third Fleet will complete its rescue mission and return to normal duties. We seek no conquest and threaten no peaceful worlds." A representative from the Pacifist Alliance stood to speak, the tall thin being radiated disapproval as he addressed the assembly. "Ambassador, your species has deployed enough firepower to conquer entire sectors. How can we trust that this is merely a rescue operation?" Rodriguez met his gaze directly. "Because that is who we are. Humans do not abandon their own. We will cross the galaxy itself to protect our people." The hyperspace exit near Kepler 442 lit up like a star being born. Admiral Chang watched from the bridge of the UES Liberty as her fleet dropped back into normal space. 200 warships materialized in perfect formation, sending energy waves rippling through the system. The sight would have been beautiful if not for the desperate situation they were racing to resolve. Commander Tony Mitchell, the Liberty's chief engineer, ran his final diagnostics from the engine room deep in the ships. Belly. Mitchell was a big man with calloused hands who had spent 15 years mining asteroids before joining the military. He understood machines better than most people understood themselves, and he had personally modified many of the systems that made human warships so effective. "Admiral, all systems are green," Mitchell reported over the intercom. "Primary weapons charged to full capacity and shields at maximum strength." Chong nodded as she studied the tactical display. The Krillian fleet was visible on sensors surrounding the damaged Terra Nova like vultures around a dying animal. Her anger burned cold as she counted 80 enemy ships against one civilian vessel. The odds had seemed overwhelming until now, but the pirates were about to learn what real overwhelming force looked like. "All ships, this is Admiral Chong," she broadcast to her fleet. "Combat formation Delta 7. Cruisers take point destroyers. Provide cover and battleships prepare for main engagement. Remember, people, we have civilians to protect, so watch your fire zones." Captain Amy Walsh aboard the cruiser Hughes Phoenix acknowledged the order with grim satisfaction. Walsh was a former test pilot who had pushed experimental aircraft beyond their design limits for fun. Her ship was one of the newest in the fleet, equipped with weapons that could punch holes through solid rock. She had been waiting for a chance to test them against real targets. "Phoenix here, Admiral," Walsh transmitted. "We're locked and loaded, and ready to show these pirates what human engineering can do." The advanced scout group, led by Captain Rick Stone's destroyer Hughes Ranger, moved ahead of the main fleet. Stone had served in the Merchant Marine before pirates killed his family, and he knew exactly what kind of people they were dealing with. His ship's sensors began painting every Krillian vessel in the system while jamming their communications. What the Krillians discovered in those first few moments changed everything they thought they knew about warfare. Human ships operated on principles that seemed to violate the known laws of physics. Their vessels could accelerate at rates that would turn most organic beings into liquid paste, and their weapons generated power levels that strained conventional understanding. War Chief Greykthos stood on his flagship's bridge, watching the human fleet deploy with growing horror. His species had been raiding civilian shipping for centuries, and they thought they understood military tactics. But the formation approaching them moved with a precision that suggested computer control combined with combat experience that came from surviving real wars. How are they accelerating so fast? Greykthos demanded of his science officer. The frightened alien checked his instruments twice before answering. Sir, their ships are pulling 15 gravities of thrust. Any crew should be crushed dead at those acceleration rates. Greykthos felt his confidence crumble as he realized the implications. These were not the weak newcomers his intelligence reports had described. These were predators from a world so hostile that surviving it had made them into living weapons. Dr. Kevin Park aboard the science vessel UES Discovery monitored alien communications as the battle began to unfold. Park was a former civilian researcher who had joined the military to study xenotechnology. His job was to gather intelligence on enemy capabilities and tactics, but today he was learning more about Krillian psychology than their technology. Admiral, the enemy communications are showing signs of panic, Park reported. They're using terms that translate roughly to impossible and death gods. Chang allowed herself a thin smile. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were called Deathworlders. Earth had forged them in conditions that would kill most species, and now they were bringing that world's violence to anyone who threatened their people. The Terra Nova itself demonstrated why human civilian ships were so feared by pirates. Captain Rachel Stone had kept her vessel operational for 6 hours against a full raiding fleet. The colony ship was designed by engineers who assumed the worst possible scenarios and built accordingly. Its emergency systems could function in conditions that would leave other ships as floating debris. Liberty, this is Terra Nova, Captain Stone transmitted. We're holding position, but our shields are down to 20%. We have wounded civilians who need immediate medical attention. Copy that, Terra Nova, Chang replied. Medical ships are standing by and will have you out of there in no time. Just hold on a little longer. Commander Steve Collins, the Liberty's tactical officer, studied the enemy formation with the eye of a chess master. Collins could see 5 moves ahead in any battle, and he had already identified the weaknesses in the Krillian deployment. His battle plan would exploit every flaw while maximizing the range advantage of human weaponry. Admiral, the first recommend we open with long-range bombardment, Collins suggested. Their ships appear to be built for close combat against civilian targets. Our weapons outrange theirs by at least 30%. Chang agreed and gave the order that would begin the Battle of Kepler 442. All ships commence firing. Target military vessels only and maintain safe distance from Terra Nova. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that had been designed to function in the extreme conditions of Earth's solar system. Particle beams that could cut through asteroid belts struck Krillian shields like hammers hitting glass. Missile volleys that could destroy space stations bracketed enemy formations with devastating accuracy. What shocked galactic observers watching from long range sensors was not just the firepower of human weapons, but their incredible efficiency. Every shot was calculated to maximize damage while minimizing the risk to friendly forces. The humans fought like machines, but with a tactical flexibility that only came from biological intelligence. Laura Green commanding the assault. Transport UES Normandy prepared her ship for the most dangerous part of the mission. Green was a former Marine who had earned her commission in ground combat before transferring to the Navy. Her job was to evacuate wounded civilians from Terra Nova while the battle raged around them. Normandy to Terra Nova, prepare for emergency. Docking, Green transmitted. We're coming in under fire, so this is going to be rough. The Normandy's hull was designed to withstand meteor impacts and solar radiation. Its shields could deflect weapons fire that would vaporize smaller vessels. But approaching a damaged ship in the middle of a battle required skills that few captains possessed. Green had those skills, and she was about to prove it not as the human fleet engaged the Krillian raiders. The true extent of Deathworlder engineering became apparent. Human ships absorbed punishment that would reduce other vessels to scrap metal. Their armor was layered with materials that could withstand direct hits from weapons, designed to crack planetary surfaces. Lieutenant Commander Paul Turner piloted his fighter from the carrier U's midway through the chaos of battle. Turner was young for his rank, but he had proven himself in combat against pirates and smugglers. His small craft was armed with weapons that could disable much larger ships, and he intended to use every advantage he possessed. "Midway control, this is Turner," he reported. "I have eyes on 3 Krillian cruisers moving to intercept the medical ships, requesting permission to engage." "Permission granted, Turner," came the reply. "Show them what a human pilot can do." Turner's fighter screamed through space at velocities that would tear apart most aircraft. His targeting computer locked onto the lead Krillian cruiser and fired a spread of missiles that had been designed to penetrate heavy armor. The warheads struck home with devastating effect, sending the enemy ship spinning out of control. But the real demonstration of human military philosophy came when Turner's fighter took a direct hit from enemy fire. His engines were damaged, and his life support was failing, but he could see Krillian ships moving toward the evacuation shuttles, carrying wounded civilians from Terra Nova. Without hesitation, Turner aimed his crippled fighter at the nearest enemy cruiser and engaged his remaining thrusters. The small craft accelerated to ramming speed while Turner transmitted his final message. "This is for everyone who never made it home," he said calmly. The fighter struck the Krillian cruiser amidships, and both ships vanished in a ball of plasma. Turner's sacrifice saved over 500 civilian lives and sent a message that echoed throughout the galaxy. Humans would die before they let innocents come to harm. War Chief Greathos watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought with cold precision and unlimited courage. His raiders were scattered and broken, while the human formation remained intact. In 30 minutes of combat, he had lost more ships than in the previous 5 years of piracy. "All ships retreat immediately," he ordered in desperation. "We cannot fight these creatures." But Admiral Chong was not finished with them yet. Her fleet had come to rescue civilians and punish pirates, and she intended to accomplish both objectives completely. The battle turned into a massacre within the first hour. Admiral Chong watched from the Liberty's bridge as her fleet systematically dismantled the Krillian raiding force with surgical precision. The enemy ships that had seemed so threatening while attacking a defenseless colony vessel now looked like toys in the face of real military power. Captain Amy Walsh pushed the Phoenix hard through the enemy formation. Her cruiser's main guns fired in perfect rhythm, sending streams of superheated plasma into Krillian shields. Each shot was calculated to maximum effect, and the results spoke for themselves. 3 enemy destroyers had already been reduced to burning wreckage, and more were following them into oblivion. "Phoenix to Liberty," Walsh reported with satisfaction in her voice. "Enemy formation is breaking apart. They're trying to scatter, but we have them boxed in." War Chief Greathos felt panic rising in his throat as he watched his carefully planned raid fall apart around him. His flagship was shaking under repeated hits from human weapons that seemed to ignore his shields completely. The bridge was filled with smoke and the smell of burning electronics, while his crew struggled to keep basic systems online. "Damage report," he shouted over the noise of explosions. His chief engineer looked up from a sparking console with terror in his eyes. "Sir, we've lost main engines, and our weapon systems are down to 30%. Hull breaches on decks 5 through 12, and life support is failing in the forward sections. Graithos stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His fleet of 80 ships was being destroyed by enemies who seemed to take no casualties in return. Human vessels absorbed hits that should have crippled them and kept fighting as if nothing had happened. Their weapons struck with accuracy that suggested computer targeting, but with tactical flexibility it could only come from experienced commanders. Commander Steve Collins aboard the Liberty coordinated the fleet's movements like a master conducting an orchestra. His tactical display showed every ship in both fleets, and he could see patterns in the chaos that others missed. The Krillians were brave fighters, but they had never faced an enemy that combined superior technology with tactical genius. Admiral recommend we tighten the formation, Collins suggested. The enemy is trying to break through our outer screen. To reach the medical ships, Chong nodded and gave the order. The human fleet moved with precision that amazed even veteran officers. Ships that massed millions of tons changed course and speed as if they were single fighters. The coordination required years of training and combat experience that most species never achieved. Captain Lavra Green guided the Normandy through the battle zone toward the damaged Terra Nova. Her assault transport was designed for exactly this kind of mission, but that didn't make it any less dangerous. Krillian fighters were still active in the area, and they were desperate enough to attack anything that moved. Normandy to Terra Nova were coming alongside for emergency docking. Green transmitted. Prepare to receive medical teams and evacuation shuttles. Captain Rachel Stone's voice came back strained but determined. Copy that, Normandy. We have over 3,000 wounded civilians ready for transport. Some are in critical condition and won't survive much longer without proper medical care. Green's ship shuddered as a Krillian fighter strafed her hull with energy weapons. The shots barely scratched her armor, but they served as a reminder that the battle was far from over. She brought the Normandy in close to Terra Nova's damaged hull and began the delicate process of emergency docking. While under fire, the evacuation proceeded with efficiency that would have impressed peacetime observers. Human medical teams moved through Terra Nova's corridors, carrying wounded civilians to safety, while combat engineers worked to stabilize the ship's failing systems. Every person involved knew that lives depended on their speed and skill. Dr. Sarah Martinez led the medical team from the Normandy into Terra Nova's emergency shelters. Martinez was a trauma surgeon who had served in combat zones before joining the Fleet Medical Service. She took one look at the wounded civilians and began triaging cases with practiced ease. I need these 5 people in surgery immediately, she told her team. The rest can wait for transport to the hospital ship. Move quickly, but don't take any unnecessary risks. Meanwhile, the battle continued to rage around them. Captain Rick Stone's destroyer Ranger had moved in close to provide cover for the evacuation. Stone's ship was smaller than the cruisers and battleships, but his crew made up for it with aggressive tactics and superior gunnery. Ranger to medical ships, Stone transmitted. We have you covered, but there are still enemy fighters in the area. Stay close to the Terra Nova, and we'll keep them off your backs. Stone's gunners were proving why destroyer crews were considered the elite of the fleet. Their rapid-fire weapons tracked Krillian fighters with deadly accuracy, while their missile systems engaged larger targets at extreme range. The Ranger danced through the battle zone like a boxer, avoiding punches while delivering devastating counterpunches of her own. Lieutenant Commander Janet Kim piloted her fighter squadron from the carrier UES Intrepid through the chaos of combat. Kim was a veteran pilot who had flown in 3 different wars, and she had never seen anything like the determination shown by her human comrades. Every pilot in her squadron was willing to die to protect the civilians being evacuated from Terra Nova. All fighters, this is Kim, she transmitted to her squadron. Priority targets are any enemy ships approaching the medical vessels. Ignore everything else and focus on protecting those evacuation shuttles. Kim's fighters moved with the coordination that came from years of training together. They formed a protective screen around the medical ships while engaging any Krillian vessel that came within weapons range. Their small craft were armed with missiles designed to cripple much larger ships, and they used every advantage they possessed. The turning point of the battle came when Admiral Chang decided to end the engagement permanently. She had watched the Krillians attack helpless civilians, and she had no intention of letting any of them escape to threaten human ships again. Her flagship's main guns had been charging for the past hour, and now they were ready to deliver judgment. "All ships, this is Admiral Chang," she broadcast to her fleet. "The Liberty will demonstrate why attacking human civilians is a fatal mistake. Clear the target zone and prepare for maximum firepower demonstration." The Liberty's main battery consisted of 4 massive particle beam cannons that could punch holes through small moons. They had been designed to engage fortified positions and enemy capital ships at extreme range. Chang intended to use them to send a message that would echo throughout the galaxy. The beams lanced out across space with the power of contained stars. They struck Greykthos' S flagship dead center, and the massive Krillian vessel simply ceased to exist. The explosion lit up the battle zone like a second sun, while debris scattered in all directions. The demonstration was both tactical and psychological, and it achieved exactly what Chang intended. "This is Admiral Chang to all Krillian vessels," she transmitted on open frequencies. "You have attacked human civilians and murdered innocent people. Surrender immediately or share the fate of your flagship." The effect was immediate. Krillian ships throughout the battle zone began powering down their weapons and broadcasting surrender signals. Their will to fight had been broken by the destruction of their command ship and the realization that they faced an enemy far beyond their capabilities. War Chief Greykthos found himself floating in an escape pod watching his fleet surrender to the humans. His flagship was gone along with most of his senior officers, and he was facing the end of everything he had built. The Krillian hegemony had been founded on the principle that strength was the only law in the galaxy, but the humans had just proven there were levels of strength his people had never imagined. The evacuation of Terra Nova continued even as Krillian ships surrendered around them. Captain Green's medical teams worked tirelessly to save every civilian they could, while combat engineers struggled to keep the colony ship from breaking apart completely. The rescue operation was a testament to human determination and organization. Under pressure got within 4 hours, the Battle of Kepler 442 was over. The Krillian raiding fleet had been destroyed or captured, while every civilian aboard Terra Nova had been successfully evacuated. The human fleet had taken minimal casualties while achieving complete tactical victory against overwhelming odds. Admiral Chang stood on her bridge, watching the aftermath of the battle with satisfaction. Medical ships were treating wounded civilians, while prison transports prepared to take Krillian survivors into custody. The mission had been successful, but more importantly, it had sent a message to every predator in the galaxy. "Fleet communications," Chang ordered. "Send a message to Galactic Command. Mission accomplished. All civilians rescued and enemy fleet neutralized. The Third Fleet is ready for new orders." The galaxy would never be the same again. 3 days after the Battle of Kepler 442, the galaxy had changed forever. High Chancellor Vorthak stood before the assembled Galactic Council, knowing that his words would shape interstellar relations for generations to come. The ancient reptilian leader had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, but he had never seen anything like the human military response. "Fellow representatives," Vorthak began with his voice carrying across the great chamber, "we have witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. A species has deployed overwhelming military force, not for conquest, but for the protection of their civilians. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally alter the balance of power among our civilizations. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez sat in the human delegation area, watching the proceedings with careful attention. The elegant diplomat had spent the past 72 hours fielding communications from alien governments seeking to understand humanity's intentions. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her expression remained calm, but inside she felt the weight of representing her entire species. The first speaker was Chancellor Kothic of the Avian Confederation. His feathers still showed signs of stress as he addressed the assembly. The human fleet deployment violated every principle of proportional response. 200 warships to rescue 50,000 civilians represents a military philosophy that threatens galactic stability. Rodriguez rose gracefully to respond. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades in diplomatic service, but also the steel of someone who had watched her people face extinction and refused to surrender. Honored Chancellor, with respect, you misunderstand our philosophy. Completely, Rodriguez said. Humanity does not calculate the value of civilian lives against military costs. When our people are threatened, we respond with everything we have. This is not aggression. It is protection, and any species that leaves us in peace has nothing to fear from us. The chamber fell silent as her words echoed through the hall. Species that had lived for millennia in careful balance suddenly found themselves confronting a civilization that operated by completely different rules. The humans didn't seek territory or resources. They simply refused to let their people die alone. On the water world of Aquatica, Prime Admiral Glub Rex received new orders from his government. The Cetacean Defense Force was to establish formal diplomatic contact with the human military and explore possibilities for mutual cooperation. The deep ocean dwellers had recognized something important in humanity's actions. Sir, the government believes the humans represent a stabilizing force in the galaxy, his aide reported. Their willingness to protect civilians could discourage piracy and aggression throughout known space. Glub Rex nodded thoughtfully. His species had always been cautious about surface dwellers, but the humans had shown they fought for principles rather than profit. That made them natural allies for any peaceful civilization. Meanwhile, Captain Rachel Stone stood on the observation deck of the hospital ship UES Mercy, watching her rescued colonists receive medical treatment. Stone had commanded Terra Nova for 3 years, and she knew every family aboard her ship. Seeing them safe after the ordeal filled her with emotions she struggled to contain. Dr. Sarah Martinez approached with the final casualty report. The trauma surgeon looked exhausted, but satisfied as she delivered the news Stone had been hoping to hear. Captain, I'm happy to report that all 50,000 civilians are accounted for and receiving appropriate care, Martinez said. We lost 12 people during the initial attack, but everyone who survived the first assault made it to safety. Stone nodded while feeling tears she refused to shed. 12 lives lost was 12 too many, but it could have been so much worse. Without Admiral Chong's fleet, the death toll would have been measured in thousands rather than dozens. Admiral Chong herself was dealing with the aftermath of victory in her own way. The Iron Lady stood in her quarters aboard the Liberty, reading reports from across human space. The Third Fleet's actions had triggered responses from every corner of the galaxy, and she needed to understand the implications. Her aide, Lieutenant Sarah Williams, knocked on the door before entering with another stack of communications. Williams had served with Chong for 5 years, and she had never seen so much diplomatic traffic after a single battle. Admiral, we have formal requests for defense treaties from 16 different species, Williams reported. The Galactic Council is requesting a full briefing on human military capabilities, and there are at least 30 news organizations requesting interviews. Chong set down the reports and walked to her window where she could see the stars beyond. Her ship, She had spent her entire career preparing for the day when humanity would have to prove itself to the galaxy. That day had come and gone, and now she had to deal with success. "Schedule a meeting with Ambassador Rodriguez," Chang ordered. "We need to coordinate our response to all these diplomatic overtures. And Williams, make sure our people understand that we're not conquerors, we're protectors." Back on Earth, the news of the Terra Nova rescue dominated every broadcast channel. President Michael Harrison addressed the nation from the Oval Office with words that would be remembered for centuries. Harrison was a former military officer who understood the significance of what had happened at Kepler 442. "My fellow Americans and citizens of Earth," Harrison began. "3 days ago, 50,000 of our people faced death at the hands of pirates. Today they are safe because brave men and women of our military crossed the void to bring them home. This is who we are as a species. We do not abandon our own, and we do not surrender to those who would harm the innocent." The president's words were broadcast not just on Earth, but throughout human space and beyond. Alien governments monitored the transmission to understand humanity's political philosophy, and what they heard both reassured and concerned them. The humans were not interested in conquest, but they were absolutely committed to protecting their people. On the mining world of Feroz, Major Guild Master Vertan made a decision that would reshape interstellar commerce. The Industrial Guild voted unanimously to offer humanity exclusive mining rights in exchange for fleet protection of their cargo vessels. Pirates had been attacking guild ships for decades, and the miners had finally found someone capable of stopping them. "The human military response exceeded all our calculations," Vorton announced to his board. "If they are willing to deploy such. Forced to protect their own civilians, they will certainly protect vessels under their protection." The Krillian hegemony, meanwhile, was collapsing into civil war as surviving fleet commanders blamed each other for the disaster at Kepler 442. War Chief Greythos sat in a Federation prison cell, knowing that his capture had triggered the end of everything his people had built. The hegemony's member worlds were declaring independence, while rival war chiefs fought over the remaining ships. Former War Chief Scar, Vin, led one of the rebel factions, and he understood what the defeat meant better than most. His species had built their civilization on the principle that might made right, but the humans had just demonstrated levels of might that made Krillian power look pathetic. "The age of raiding is over," Scarthan told his followers. "The humans have shown the galaxy what real military power looks like. Any species that threatens their people will be destroyed completely. We must find a new path forward." 6 months. After the battle, the galaxy had settled into a new pattern of relationships. Species that had never communicated before were establishing trade agreements under human protection. Piracy dropped to its lowest levels in recorded history, as criminals realized that attacking the wrong ship could bring down the wrath of the human fleet. Captain Amy Walsh commanded the Phoenix on patrol duty through the Outer Rim territories, where Terra Nova's colonists had finally established their new settlement. Walsh watched the growing city from orbit and felt pride in what they had accomplished. These people were building homes and raising families because she and her comrades had been willing to fight for them. The settlement had been named New Hope, and it was protected by a permanent human naval base, 3 destroyers, and a full marine battalion ensured that no pirate would ever again threaten the families living below. Children played in parks, while their parents worked to build a better future among the stars. Dr. Elena Rodriguez completed her final report on the diplomatic aftermath of Kepler 442 with satisfaction. Humanity had been accepted as a major power. In galactic politics, not through conquest or intimidation, but through demonstrated commitment to protecting innocent life. Dozens of species had requested mutual defense treaties, while others simply asked for the right to call for human assistance if threatened. The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth about humanity in those 4 hours of battle. humans came from, a world that had tried to kill them every day of their existence, and that experience had forged them into something unique. They possessed the technology and determination to cross the void itself to protect their own people, and they would use both without hesitation. As Ambassador Rodriguez submitted her report, she included a simple conclusion that would be studied by xenobiologists for generations. Humanity has established itself as the protector species of the galaxy, not through aggression, but through the absolute refusal to abandon those who depend on us.